Welcome to the writing test review for 7th ELA. This is going to be for the AASA standard test, A day. You'll take this test on Monday, March 30th, B day, Tuesday, March 31st. AASA Academic Standard Assessment, State of Arizona. You're familiar with the format. We've done the practice test. We haven't practiced logging in, but you'll have a ticket with a username and password on test day to log in. We'll all do this together. You're familiar with the basic setup with the three sources, the writing guide and the writing prompt, which is on the right side of your screen, both of which can be enlarged. I've given you writing guides for informative explanatory essay writing guide and argumentative essay writing guide. I've given you both of those writing guides. Please review them. Take a moment this weekend to review those and just have them be familiar to you, and the wording on there be second nature. Here's the grading rubric that I provided for the informative explanatory essay. The categories and the points that you can receive. You can get up to 4 points in purpose, focus, and organization. The key here is have your purpose clearly either informative, where you just simply explain the topic that was given to you, or if it's argumentative, you argue the topic, choose a side and argue it. Your focus should be on that, the entire essay, and the organization should be from introduction, body paragraphs that cover each of the three sources, and a conclusion that wraps things up. We have topic, audience, purpose. For audience, this is the individual or individuals you are writing to. Your audience will not be given to you on most writing tests, so do not stress this. Just assume you're writing for a teacher or a professional adult. So just imagine you're writing for me in our class, just like you normally do. As far as topic goes, topic's what you're writing about. Your topic will always be given to you in a writing test, at least the ones in junior high. You're not going to be asked to just come up with something on your own. You're always going to be given a topic, and through next year, 8th grade, you'll also be given sources, which makes it very accessible. It means you know what you're writing about, and you have the information right there at your fingertips. So do not stress this. An example of this, again, you know what you're writing about. If this was the prompt as it was 4 years ago, roadside attractions, why, explain how and why they remain meaningful today in the history. Here you have it with the three sources. Pull from the sources. Just a reminder, only use information from the sources. Don't use any personal information or your own opinion on this or any experience you've had in the past. It's only the sources. As far as purpose, that's the key. Your purpose will always be given to you on a writing test. In the case of inform, persuade, it could also be narrate, tell a story, express, or entertain. However, for testing purposes, they limit it to inform and persuade. Another word for persuade, we'll get to this in a minute, is argumentation or argumentative writing. So your two purposes that you can expect on a writing test, first and foremost, informative, and secondarily, be ready for argumentative, persuasive. The other writing purposes, don't worry about, don't stress it. You won't get it. As far as purpose, as we know, that's one of our big parts of our triangle in any writing situation. Your purpose is to inform for 7th grade. Again, this is going to be the most common and likely writing test purpose. So you can go into this being ready to receive an informative writing prompt. Carefully read the instructions to know what the writing prompt is asking. You will typically be asked to explain something if you're doing an informative essay. So if it's asking you to write a multi-paragraph informative essay, it's going to be asking you to explain something. We learned other informative writing types, subtypes, or structures like compare, contrast, problem, solution, cause, effect. You're not going to be asked to go in depth like that. You're just going to simply be asked to describe something or explain something. And that's actually part of the title. It's called informative writing, but it's also called explanatory writing. So notice they have it They're using both titles here: informative, explanatory essay. Explanatory says it all. You're just explaining something, a process, or how something works, or the history behind something. That's what you did here. When it says write an essay, an informative essay about why, it's simply asking you to explain. Or it even says it here when we did, like we did in class with our writing test practice, when I ask you to explain proven strategies that work for teams to handle stress and perform better under pressure, I was asking you to explain from the sources, those three sources, these three articles, how one would go about that. So you're simply taking all the evidence, taking all the information, making sense of it for your reader, and explaining this information. You saw how this worked in an example of a good essay that had a perfect score. This is a real essay that I took and typed up. It was originally in written form. This is a perfect essay for the purpose of writing a test, at least. Remember, these are all rough drafts, so this was an exceptional effort by the person that wrote this. So we looked at that as a model. We looked at these other examples as not so great. So you want to aim to create something like this with this organization, this use of evidence, elaboration, citations, references, and also just good writing conventions with grammar, punctuation, and spelling. And it's got the introduction, the conclusion, and the three body paragraphs that relate to the sources, each one by one in turn. The ugly, we talked about that, doesn't have virtually any of those things. You also took home for homework early in the week the AASA writing sample analysis worksheet, or we actually did this in class, where you actually analyze what you thought was the main strength, the weak of the good one, some of the weaknesses, and what was lacking in the not so good one or the ugly one. And now that you've done that analysis, you can kind of know what you need to include in yours and avoid not including. Writing purpose for persuasion, writing to persuade is also something you could see. We talked about this in class. AASA calls this argumentative writing. In our class, we talk about one of the writing purposes being writing to persuade, and we're going to write a persuasive essay in quarter 4, right when we come back from testing. But AASA uses the term argumentative. So don't let that throw you off. It's basically the same thing. For 7th grade, it's very possible you will get this writing test purpose. I don't want to necessarily say 50-50, but just go into the test expecting this to be a possibility, a strong possibility. Close to 50-50. Remember, with argumentative writing, you are going to be given 2 opposing arguments. That's what makes it an argument. There's 2 possible outcomes that are reasonable, and that's why we have an argument, and that's why it's worth arguing about. So you're going to be given 2 opposing arguments. For example, cell phones should be banned from schools, or cell phones should be allowed in schools or not banned. What you need to do with that is you will have the 3 sources, just like you do for informative writing, that provide evidence, some sort of combination for both for and against the position, whatever it is. Typically, you'll have one article that's completely for it, one that's completely against it, or gives you the other side of the other side of the coin, and then you might have one source that kind of splits the difference and tells you, makes the claim for both, and also tells you kind of the downsides of both. What's the evidence for supporting both, and what's the evidence that kind of goes against both. Your job is to take all of this information, because remember, you're going to read the sources first, and choose one of the positions and make an argument in favor of it based on the evidence. You're only basing this argument on evidence from the sources. You're not using personal experience. You're not using your opinion, although it is true, and we talked about this in class, several you mentioned in class, and you're correct. For persuasive writing, we are going to be allowed to use our opinion and our experience. But just for now, just keep that at the door, check that at the door when you come in for testing, because AASA only for argumentative writing, they only want to see you use the evidence. They don't really care about your opinion. They just want to know, they want the evidence to speak for itself. So they want you to make a good, logical argument. For these 2 prompts, you would need to clearly pick one of the sides. You're not saying, hey, this is comparing these 2 And it's not an informative essay where you're comparing the two and giving your reader information about, hey, the good and the bad with both. They both have good and bad, right? Allowing phones and banning phones. We all understand that. We've experienced that this year. Some of both the good and the bad. But you're going to have to pick a side and make a strong claim. So a claim will be something like cell phones should be banned in schools. Once you give a claim, and again, we're going to talk about this, once you make a claim for anything, you should always be able to give reasons for your claim. So reasons could be cell phones should be banned from schools because, note that reasons always have a because or something similar to that. We just might as well just get used to using the word because. So you make your claim, cell phones should be banned from schools. Then you put a because on there, which is going to introduce your reasons. The writer here used 3 reasons. They distract from the learning environment, they create anxiety among students, and they are often used inappropriately. Now, note here that this would not have been the student's just opinion. This would have been from sources. We won't go take time to, look at sources and see where they got this information, but just accept it at face value that they got this information, this particular writer, from the sources. This isn't just their personal opinion or their experience. Reason should always equal evidence. To my last point, your reason should be from your sources. Your reason should be from your sources. And again, we can assume that the below is from the sources. Those 3 reasons, because, and there they are, 1, 2, and 3 again. It's very possible, again, that you could get this purpose of argumentative writing on a writing test. Just be ready. That's all. I know we haven't really talked about it in class. Don't stress out about it. Just do the best you can. It's very similar to the informative essay in terms of structure and how you use evidence and elaboration, and also how you cite and the conventions you need to have as far as spelling correctly and using punctuation and good grammar. So all of that's going to be the same. So really, you just need to make a couple tweaks. And I gave you this handout. Very similar, as we mentioned again in class, very similar to the informative writing one. The only difference is you need to be thinking. The focus is, instead of giving 3 sources of evidence to help make sense of explaining something, one thing like roadside attractions or how teens can manage stress, and they're all kind of aligned. With the argumentative essay, you're going to have to kind of juggle things around and make a claim, but still address the counterclaim, especially if one of the sources only talks about the opposite argument. The opposite argument is called the counterclaim. Then you're going to have to address that. You're going to have to say, so-and-so, expert so-and-so says that, cell phones should be allowed in schools because it's good for parents to be able to communicate with their kids, and it's good for the kids to be able to learn, with using a technology that they're going to be using for their entire lives, something like that. You're still going to have purpose, focus, organization is something you're scored on 4 through 1. So just do a good job of staying focused, organize your essay with an intro, body paragraphs, where maybe you introduce your main claim and the best evidence for that. And then you introduce the counterclaim in paragraph 2. And then in paragraph 3, you mention why your claim or why the other 2 sources' argument still is better than the counterclaim. Despite the fact that type of thing. Despite the fact that some experts do say that cell phones are beneficial, do have benefits in school, they still are outweighed by all the negatives. So you could always say that, right? And evidence and elaboration, again, is going to be a big part of it. You're quoting your experts, even if it's just anytime you see a name, just go ahead and if they say something interesting, like you were doing in class today and yesterday, write the expert's name down, put a quote of what they say, according to blah, 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 Dr. Sonia Lee, and then quote what they say, and then elaborate, which means explain it or put it in simpler terms or give an example of it, or just somehow go into more details with that quote or that evidence. And then maybe just summarize it real quick, tie it to your other points possibly, and then move on to the next paragraph. Same thing with this. For a multi-paragraph essay, keep in mind, like I mentioned to you in class, I'll try to remember to mention it in all the classes, this is just a rough draft. So always keep in mind that for any writing test that you are essentially writing a rough draft. It's the first time you're picking up pencil or putting fingers on keyboard. So this would be like if you wrote an essay for my class and all we did was that first brainstorm and rough draft all at once and said, okay, guys, turn it in and we're good. I mean, that would be convenient, right? But the essays wouldn't be nearly as good as they are when we have several drafts, first draft, rough draft, second draft, third draft, final draft, whatever. I mean, typically we do rough draft, second draft, final draft with at least one peer review in between, a couple of different writer workshops. Just think about how much better your essay would be if you could do that. Well, the state of Arizona realizes that. The graders realize you're under pressure in terms of time and mental stress. You are not expected to create the perfect essay. So don't stress about it. Also, when it comes to paragraphs, the perfect essay might be a 5-paragraph essay. It might have 5 paragraphs. If you had a chance to revise and did multiple drafts, then you could easily get, whatever is initially like a 6 or 8 or 9 or whatever crazy long essay, you could get it to 5 paragraphs if you had time to revise it. But under pressure, you might write something closer to 4 paragraphs. Maybe one is really long, or you just combined a couple of the sources into one paragraph accidentally because it's hard to kind of think of everything on the spot. Or you might ramble a bit and be closer to 6 or 7 paragraphs or more. Probably it would be 6 or 7. That's okay. Don't stress it. Also with sentences, the perfect essay paragraph might have typically 4 to 6 varied sentences, a combination of simple, complex, and compound. But under pressure, you will likely write shorter sentences and more sentences. So you're going to write probably a ton of simple sentences that are a little bit choppy, and you're probably going to write more of them instead of 4 to 6. 4 is just real nice and polished. And what you would do, again, if you had peer review and you had a chance to revise everything and take the essay home and work on it over the weekend, you could do that. But under the time and mental pressure of testing, you're probably going to write more sentences. You're probably going to ramble a bit, and it's probably going to be like more than 6 or more maybe. That's okay. Don't stress it. Writing more sentences and even rambling a bit is okay. After all, that's what we do in rough drafts. Just make sure you are including evidence from all 3 sources and elaborating on that evidence. Again, explaining the evidence, making sense of it for your reader, kind of making a big picture. At some point, all the different evidence has to come together. Again, the writing test on Monday, March 30th for A-Day, and Tuesday, March 31st for B-Day. And I wish you guys luck. Can't wait to get in there with you guys and see what you can do.